Thanks so much for having me. My name is Stephanie Licata. I am representing Bluebird Bio today. I'm the global medical lead for the cerebral adrenoleukodystrophy program, and so it's a real pleasure to be able to speak at these events. I've been in the role for about a year, and just recently had the opportunity to get more involved with the community, and it's been just really thrilling. So before I get into any of what I really want to talk about, I do have a couple of disclosures that I have to provide. One is, as I said, I'm an employee of Bluebird. I have equity in the company. The second disclosure is that the investigational products that I'll mention today in this presentation are not approved for use by the FDA, and I'm restricted by federal regulations regarding what I can say about them. But that said, I'm really happy to be able to share a little bit about what Bluebird does. What we do, provide some key updates in the ALD program. Now, I said before that I'm the global medical lead for the program, and to give a little context about what that means, the function that I work in is called medical affairs, and that department in a pharmaceutical, biotech, or medical device company is responsible for bridging research with patient care. So what we want to do is communicate scientific data and relevant medical information to address clinical questions. And also we want to help healthcare providers manage their patients toward optimal outcomes. So the goal is to elevate patient care, and one critical facet of doing that is sharing information. And so that's why it's so important that I'm here today to share with you what I'm able to. So again, thanks for that opportunity. An important note, though, is what we don't do in medical and what we don't do at a company in general is to dispense medical advice. So if you do have specific care-related questions, please do reach out to your healthcare team. So all that said, I am happy to tell you some facts and figures about Bluebird. First, I think the title of the slide says it all. We want to develop curative therapies to give patients and their families more Bluebird days. And Bluebird days is ski jargon that means, this kind of perfect day where the sky is very blue and the powder is fresh. And what we mean by saying that is just giving patients and families like the time together to be together, to go to school, hobbies, whatever it is, just kind of normal life. So our focus at Bluebird is on severe genetic disease, and we have industry-leading clinical and research programs in sickle cell disease, beta thalassemia, and CALD. We have a lot of experience in terms of how long we've been around, more than 10 years now, and treated over 170 patients in our trials with about 485 patient years of experience. And when we're talking in terms of patient years, that's to be able to express the culminative amount of years of follow-up after patients have been treated across all the clinical trials. So the patient years is kind of a statistical construct that accounts for like the varying duration of exposure among patients. So you can imagine that some patients may have only been followed for 6 months post-treatment at this point in time. Maybe some have been followed for 6 years. So how do we talk about exposure in a unified way with these different denominators of time? And patient years lets us do that. And I'm explaining it because patient years is referenced a couple of times throughout the presentation because we're proud of the amount of experience that we have with our gene therapies. We also have a lot of experience with manufacturing, and we've gained a really good understanding of our therapies. We have the largest and deepest ex vivo gene therapy data set in the world. And in exciting news, we're targeting 3 approvals by the end of 2023. So we think that this is exciting for those patient communities. So this slide speaks to the lentiviral vector technology we use to add functional genes to a patient's stem cells to try to fix disease. So I'm not getting bogged down in the nitty-gritty of gene therapy here, but more sharing why we believe in our gene therapy platform and that we're driving the field forward. First, our approach recognizes that each severe genetic disease acts differently and has different effects on an individual's health, and therefore the therapies need to be custom designed to address the underlying cause of those specific diseases. Next, I've mentioned already that our therapies are deeply studied with more than 485 patient years of experience, and we've amassed the largest data set in the world. The final point that I would make here is that our therapies are traceable, meaning that we can identify and track lentiviral vector modified cells after delivery to a patient. And this helps us understand the product's efficacy and safety. And we have the knowledge base and the tool set that allows very precise mapping of where our lentiviral vectors integrate into the genome. And this enables us to assess the impact on DNA and monitor every patient very closely. So we're excited about our heritage, so to speak, as I mentioned on the previous slide, and our abilities to drive the science and the field of gene therapy forward. So I've mentioned several times that we have 3 clinical programs, and this slide lays them out and more clearly supports the statements I think that I made earlier about our experience. So the 3 therapies that we're working on are Beti-cel for beta thalassemia, Lovo-cel for sickle cell disease, and Ellie-cel for CALD. So each therapy is targeting a key gene in the specific disease, again, speaking to the custom design. And one of the key takeaways here is around the number of patients who have been treated across the trials and the maximum follow-up time that we have to date. So, upwards of 50, 60, 70 patients in trials and 6 or 7 years of follow-up. It is really important to have that appreciable amount of follow-up. And of note, excuse me, 67 patients have been treated in the Ellie-cel trials. And you may or may not be familiar with the Ellie-cel clinical studies. This slide describes them to provide a frame of reference. So the program started a number of years ago with the ALD 102 study, and which is complete now with 32 patients. This is an error on the slide where it says active and not recruiting. The study is actually complete. Now, in contrast, the ALD 104 study is active. It's not recruiting. It's fully enrolled with 35 patients. Both studies enrolled patients with early CALD. And a key difference between these 2 studies being that ALD excluded patients with matched sibling donors, whereas the 104 study had no such restriction. A commonality between them is that once patients complete 102 and 104, they can enroll in the long-term follow-up study. That's called LTF 304. And this study is observational in nature and will follow patients for 13 years beyond the 2-year interventional studies 102 and 104. So this means we can follow them for a total of 15 years. And this long-term like follow-up and data capture in the real world is not uncommon. It really allows drug makers to continuously learn more about their products and help refine clinical decision-making over the long term. So more information about these trials can be found on clinicaltrials.gov. So one of the program updates that I wanted to share today specifically is around some of the safety events that have occurred, and you may have heard about them already. Last summer in August, we announced that bluebird had received reports of myelodysplastic syndrome, MDS, which is a type of blood cancer, in 2 patients who had been treated with Ellie-cel in the ALD 104 study. So these diagnoses were made based on findings from bone marrow biopsies after about 1 year in one patient and after about 2 years post-treatment in the other patient. We think that these cases result from the lentiviral vector integrating near a gene that could be involved in MDS, but we're really still trying to understand a lot of the details around that, because certainly there's probably more to it and it's multifactorial and it takes a while to get these studies really complete. And so that is an ongoing investigation. Now, more recently, a 3rd diagnosis was made, and we reported this. This was in a patient who was treated in the ALD 102 study about 7.5 years ago. And we really don't know much about this case yet at all. We're looking into a relationship with the lentiviral vector insertion, but we really have no case details at this point in time. So what we do know is that all 3 patients are under the care of their treating physicians and they're undergoing treatment for MDS. Now, as a result of the first case, because we are in close contact with FDA and it's important to be communicating with them, they put the trials on hold. Now, both trials are done enrolling and treating patients, but regardless, we're still working with the FDA closely to answer their questions and get these studies off hold. The FDA understandably wants to make sure that patients are safe. That's also our priority at bluebird. And we're trying to understand this as much as we can, because it's important for the gene addition therapy field in general, that we know as much as possible about what's going on here scientifically and mechanistically. But then meanwhile, while that's happening, we also announced just last month that the FDA accepted our BLA for Elicell for priority review. And they've set a PDUFA date of June 17th this year. And I feel like this blue box at the top is a lot of regulatory jargon. And what does this actually really mean, right? Well, the BLA, or the Biologic License Application, is a request to introduce a product like into interstate commerce. So it's essentially a request for marketing authorization. And the fact that FDA accepted the filing means that they looked through the application package to determine if it was complete enough for them to be able to review it. So that's what that means. And then the priority review designation is granted to therapies that have the potential to provide significant improvements in the treatment of serious conditions like Elicell. And the target review timeline then is a little shortened. It's 6 months after the acceptance of the filing versus a standard timeline, which would be about 10 months after that filing decision. And then finally, the PDUFA date, the Prescription Drug User Fee Act, that is simply when FDA notifies of an approval or not. And the other regulatory notes on the slide, I would say, are like the proposed indication statement for patients less than 18 years of age with early CALD who do not have an available and willing matched sibling donor. This simply reflects the population of patients who were recruited into the studies. The other notes around orphan drug status and rare pediatric disease and breakthrough, these are all different programs that are offered to encourage companies to, in one way or another, to develop drugs for rare disease. So some incentives there. And then finally, I think, and this is a good place to end for the moment on this positive note, is that if approved, Elicell would be the first approved treatment in the United States to address the underlying genetic cause of CALD. So I would end it there and open for questions.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. So 3 approvals by the end of 2023. It's going to be a busy year at bluebird, it sounds like.
Yeah.
We do have one question.
I wasn't watching the chat, sorry.
No, I'm happy to read them to you. Does this mean that the FDA has deemed the risk not significant based on information you have provided?
No, there was no value judgment in the filing. It's really about, is the application complete enough for review? And the clinical hold is just, their own investigation. Let's understand everything. And that's exactly would be our approach to, let's understand everything that's going on. So they've not made any judgment.
Okay. What is the status with Elicell in the EMA?
So that is, we are in the process of withdrawing our marketing authorizations because we have wound down our operations in the EU.